You say something, and no one responds, not because they didn't hear you, but because they chose not to. You send a message, you see it delivered, you see it read, and then nothing. And in that silence, something uncomfortable starts to happen. You begin to question yourself. Was it what you said? Did you say too much? Or worse, did you somehow become easy to ignore? Because here's the part no one really talks about. People don't ignore randomly. And no, it's not always because they're busy. Most people think they get ignored because others don't care, because people are busy, because timing was wrong, or because they simply weren't interested. And sometimes, that's true, but not most of the time, because being ignored is rarely random, and it's almost never just about what you said. It's about something far less obvious, something people feel long before you even speak. And once you understand this, you start to see a pattern. The same people who get ignored in one room are taken seriously in another. The same words, spoken by someone else, get a completely different reaction. So the question is not just, why are people ignoring me? The real question is, what are they responding to that I'm not even aware of? Centuries ago, thinkers like Machiavelli began to notice something uncomfortable about human behavior. People don't respond to intentions, they respond to perception. Not who you are, but how you appear to be. And much later, Carl Jung observed something similar, that human interactions are rarely rational. They are shaped by unconscious signals, status, confidence, presence, the subtle cues people pick up without even realizing it. Which means, before you say a single word, people have already decided how seriously they will take you, how much attention they will give you, and whether you are worth responding to at all. Not consciously, but instinctively. Because attention is not a neutral act, it is selective. And that selection follows patterns. Patterns that are invisible to most people, but once you see them, you can't unsee them. At the center of all this, there is one simple idea. Attention is not given equally, it is filtered. And what it filters for is not effort, it is not intention. And it is definitely not how nice you are. It filters for perception, for value, and for signals of power, which means being ignored is not random. It is a response to how you are being perceived in that moment. The first pattern is simple. People pay attention to what feels valuable and ignore what feels replaceable. You can see this everywhere. Two people say the same thing. One gets acknowledged, the other gets overlooked. Not because the idea was different, but because the perceived value was, and that's uncomfortable. Because it means being ignored is not always about what you do, but how you are positioned in the eyes of others. In a conversation, people don't consciously decide, I will ignore this person. It happens faster than that. Their attention shifts toward what feels more important, more relevant, more impactful, and away from what feels ordinary, predictable, easy to replace. Think about it. When someone you respect speaks, you listen, even if what they say is simple. But when someone you don't perceive as important speaks, your attention drifts, not out of disrespect, but out of instinct, because attention follows perceived value, not effort, not intention, and not kindness alone. The second pattern is harder to accept. The more available you are, the easier it becomes to ignore you. At first, that sounds unfair, because you've been told the opposite. Be present. Be supportive. Be there for people. And yet, the people who are always available are often the ones taken for granted, not valued less as people, but noticed less. Because when something is always there, it stops feeling important. It becomes expected, predictable, background. And attention doesn't stay on what feels constant. It moves toward what feels limited, what feels uncertain, what feels like it could disappear. This is why the person who replies instantly is often ignored, while the person who takes their time is waited for, not because they are better, but because they are less available. And that changes perception. It creates a subtle imbalance. One person is chasing attention, the other is controlling it, and people respond differently to both. Because attention is not just about connection, it is about tension. And when there is no tension, attention fades. The third pattern explains something even deeper. People don't respond to effort, they respond to signals. Signals of confidence, signals of certainty, signals of power. Not loud power, not obvious dominance, but subtle indicators. How you carry yourself, how you speak, how you react when ignored, because people are constantly asking one silent question: is this someone I should pay attention to? And they don't answer it logically. They answer it instinctively, which means you can try harder, be nicer, say more, and still be ignored, because none of those things change the signal. And this is where most people get stuck. They increase effort instead of changing perception. They speak more clearly instead of speaking with weight. They try to be liked instead of being respected, and without realizing it, they reinforce the very thing they're trying to escape. Because attention does not follow effort. It follows perceived importance, and importance is communicated long before words are even heard. But there's one more layer to this, and this is where it becomes uncomfortable. Because sometimes, people are not ignoring you because of your value, or your availability, or even your signals. Sometimes, they're responding to something inside themselves. Carl Jung believed that people don't see others clearly. They see their own perceptions reflected back at them, which means when someone ignores you, it is not always a judgment of who you are. It can be a reflection of what they are focused on, their priorities, their insecurities, their internal world, and that creates a strange contradiction. The same person who ignores you today may pay attention to you tomorrow, not because you changed, but because they did. Because attention is not stable, it shifts with context, with emotion, with perception. And once you understand this, something changes. You stop taking every moment of silence personally. Not because it doesn't matter, but because you see it more clearly, as information. You've probably seen this happen. Someone gets ignored in one environment, their ideas overlooked, their presence barely noticed. And then something changes. They move to a different group, a different setting, and suddenly, people listen. They respond. They pay attention. Not because the person became smarter, not because they changed their personality overnight, but because the perception around them changed. The context changed, and with it, their position. Which means, being ignored is not always a fixed state. It's a shifting one, dependent on where you are and how you are seen. But this leads to a much more important question. If attention is not random, and it's not always personal, then what actually determines whether you are noticed or ignored? At this point, everything starts to come together, and the uncomfortable truth becomes harder to ignore. Being ignored is not just about other people. It's about perception, about signals, about position. But more than that, it's about something deeper. How you are seen before you even speak. Because in most situations, people are not reacting to your words. They're reacting to their interpretation of you. And once that interpretation is set, everything you say is filtered through it, which means you can explain more. Try harder, be clearer, and still be ignored. Not because you lack something, but because the perception has already been decided. And this is where it shifts. The problem is not always that people ignore you. It's that they have already placed you in a category, someone to listen to, or someone to overlook. And once you are placed there, changing that perception becomes difficult, because it's not about the moment, it's about the position you hold in their mind. So when you step back and look at it clearly, a few patterns begin to stand out. Attention does not follow effort, it follows perception. Value is not something you declare, it is something others decide. And often, it is decided before you even get the chance to prove it. Being constantly available does not increase attention. It reduces it. Because what is always present is rarely prioritized. And most importantly, people do not respond to who you are in isolation. They respond to how you fit into their mental hierarchy, where they place you, how they see you, and what they believe you represent. which means being ignored is not random. It is structured, predictable. And once you understand that, you stop seeing it as rejection and start seeing it as information. So in the end, the question is not, why do people ignore me? Because now you already know. It's not random, it's not always personal, and it's rarely about a single moment. The real question is, what am I signaling without realizing it? How am I being perceived before I even speak? Because once you start seeing that, something changes. You stop chasing attention, you stop over-explaining, you stop trying to be heard by everyone, and instead, you become more aware of your presence, your positioning, your signals, and slowly, without forcing it, people begin to respond differently, not because you demanded attention, but because you changed how you are seen. And once you understand this, you stop seeing silence as rejection and start seeing it as feedback, something you can observe, something you can learn from, because attention was never random. It was always following patterns. Patterns most people never notice, but now you do.